A CEO
need to stick
fired a
together on
mother
this.
over
It's
greed.
the only way we'll get
His
through it.
perfect world was shattered by four bikers, one pink bicycle, and a cardboard sign that said, "For sale." The bikers learned who took everything from her. The sun was a fist tightening on the quiet suburban street, heating the pavement until the air above it shimmered. For blocks, the only sound had been the drowsy drone of cicadas and the distant whine of a lawnmower. Then came the rumble. It wasn't just noise, it was a physical pressure, a low guttural vibration that settled in the chest and sent a nervous tremor through the foundations of the neatly kept homes. Four Harleys, black as midnight and dripping chrome, turned the corner, their engines thundering a challenging rhythm against the calm afternoon. The riders wore the collective weight of their chosen lives: leather, denim, and vests emblazoned with the fiery insignia of their club. Their presence was immediate, overwhelming, and utterly discordant with the manicured lawns and pastel shutters. Behind the lace curtains, eyes watched, wary, judgmental, and fixed on the spectacle of four walking judgments. The man in the lead, the largest among them, was Tank. Beside him rode Viper, whose eyes rarely stopped moving. Mason brought up the rear, quiet and imposing. But it was the man in the middle, the one they called Rider, or sometimes, chillingly, Wolf, who felt the strange, uneasy pull of the setting. Wolf. The nickname was a scar. It had been given to him after he'd lost his own son years ago, a loss that had stripped him bare and left him with only the raw, protective instinct of a predator whose pack had been violated. Yet today he felt less like a wolf and more like a vessel for an old, cold grief. He was searching for a reason to believe in the fire, but all he found was ash. They slowed, the machines idling, casting a dense, oily smell into the clean suburban air. And then, cutting through the heavy engine sound, came the voice. It was high, thready, and heartbreakingly pure. "Sir, will you buy my bike?" Ryder hit the kill switch, the sudden silence around his machine deafening. His three brothers followed suit. The four heavy boots hit the warm asphalt, a dull, resonant thud that seemed to shake the perfect silence. Standing on the edge of the sidewalk, framed against the menacing silhouette of the chrome and steel, was a little girl, Mira. She couldn't have been more than 6. Her hair was a wild, bright tangle, and her dress, while clean, was clearly too formal for an afternoon on the street, suggesting someone had dressed her with enormous, fragile care. Next to her stood a pink bicycle, its white basket slightly dented, and clutched in her hands was a scrap of cardboard, creased and worn, bearing the stark, block-lettered message, "For sale." Ryder felt his lungs seize. The contrast was too cruel. The innocence of the pink bike against the harsh black reality of their machines. He walked toward her, his movements stiff, almost wary, as if afraid of scaring a small, wounded bird. He knelt, the leather of his trousers squeaking, bringing his tattooed face level with hers. He saw the truth in her wide, exhausted eyes, a deep, settling weariness that did not belong in a child. "Please, sir," Mira whispered, clutching the sign tighter. "Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days." Behind her, near the shade of a massive oak, an older woman sat slumped, pale and alarmingly still, wrapped in a thin, worn blanket. It was a sight that clawed at the protective core of every man there. Tank muttered a low oath. Viper looked away. Ryder, the wolf, felt that buried thread of anger, the one he thought had snapped years ago, tighten and vibrate. Tell me your name, kiddo," he murmured, his voice a low, rough rasp, utterly stripped of the thunder he used on his club brothers. "Mira," she replied, "and that's my bike, Princess. I need to sell her for food money." Ryder shifted his gaze from the bike to the woman under the tree. "Who did this to your mom, Mira?" he asked, keeping his voice impossibly soft. And Mira, in halting breaths, punctuated by tiny fierce tears, told the story of Clara, her mother, and the man who had destroyed their world with a pen stroke. Clara, a woman who worked 12-hour shifts to make ends meet, had been employed by a local, massive catering and event company. The CEO, a man named Mr. Hensley, was a local pillar of the community, the kind who gave television interviews about corporate social responsibility and smiled from magazine covers. "Mommy said he was like a rich uncle, always shaking hands," Mira explained, her brow furrowed. "But then, the boss man said the company was getting lean. He called it downsizing." When Clara pleaded, desperate for just a few weeks' extension, enough time to collect her final check and find a stopgap job, Hensley had looked at her like a piece of faulty machinery. "You are replaceable, Clara," he said, without even the courtesy of an apology. He had her escorted out, leaving her with no severance, no references, and no ability to feed her daughter. Since then, shame and weakness had kept Clara from seeking aid. The hunger was consuming her. Mira had taken the only thing of value she possessed, the pink bicycle she adored, to save her mother. Ryder stood slowly, his shadow falling over the little girl. The anger wasn't buried anymore. It was cold iron rising in his throat. This wasn't just poverty. This was malice veiled as business. This was a man of power, actively crushing the vulnerable and smiling while he did it. Tank stepped up, his face a granite mask. "Wolf?" Ryder ordered them to get back on the bikes. His eyes locked on the pale Clara. "Viper, give the kid the cash. Enough to feed them for a month." Viper, without a word, pulled out his own heavy, worn wallet. He peeled off a fat stack of bills, more than the bike was worth, more than Mira could even count, and placed it gently into her outstretched hand. "Keep the bike, kiddo," Ryder repeated, his voice now rough. "This is a down payment. You don't owe us anything, but he owes you everything." He told Mira to go sit with her mother, to get her to drink something, and promised they would be back. The four men mounted their machines. They rode away not with the chaotic roar of a gang, but with the focused, determined thrum of a single relentless machine. They stopped at a nondescript truck stop 6 miles out. The air was heavy with the smell of diesel and old coffee. They sat at a scarred picnic table, the sun beating down, the chrome on the Harleys cooling with faint, sharp metallic ticks. "We're going back to the old ways, Welf?" Tank asked, his voice low, his hands resting on the table, thick and scarred. Ryder shook his head. He pulled out his phone, his thumb moving across the screen with surprising dexterity. "Hensley is not a street punk. He's a gilded cage kind of coward. Violence just makes him a victim. We don't need rage. We need leverage." "The woman worked for him," Mason stated, his eyes narrow. "Exactly," Ryder confirmed. "The choice of a man who thinks his public image is his shield. He's all charity drives, gala dinners, and corporate social responsibility brochures. He worships perception." Ryder pulled up articles, photos, and public records on his phone. Mr. Hensley, CEO of Prosperitas Catering and Events, Philanthropist of the Year, member of the City Council's Charity Board. The pieces clicked into place. "We hit him where he lives," Viper chimed in, leaning forward. Ryder looked at his brothers. These men were rough, complicated and carried their own burdens, but they knew the difference between being a predator and being a protector. They lived by a code forged in loyalty and harsh experience. "We don't use a bullet tank, we use the truth, framed by the image of that pink bicycle," Ryder said, his voice hard. "We show him the cost of his greed, and we give him a choice: redeem the child or lose everything he pretends to be." They rode again, the destination now the downtown financial district, where skyscrapers speared the blue sky, monuments to the very arrogance they despised. The confrontation in the tower. Hensley's office was located on the 30th floor of a sleek black glass tower, a fortress of polished marble and cold steel.